In this lecture, we're going to introduce how to conduct a one-factor ANOVA with repeated measures in Microsoft Excel. And I'm going to go through how to do this using what I call the manual method in Excel. And to do that, we'll need to make reference to a number of the equations that we'll have to apply. So what you see here is some sample data collected from 10 research participants that were evaluated at 5 different time points, and these data relate to the number of errors or wobbles that participants make when they're riding a bike as fatigue ensues. And so as they cycle longer and longer, you'll see that participants will commit more and more errors as they lose some control on the bike. But to conduct the one-way ANOVA, I'm just going to scroll over here to the right on my Excel sheet, and what I have in here are all of the equations that we'll use to conduct the one-way ANOVA with repeated measures using this manual method, and these equations fall under 3 general categories. We'll need to compute what's called the sum of squares, and I'll step through all of these different equations. I'm just going to scroll down. The second is the calculation of the degrees of freedom, as you'll see those equations here, and the third one are the mean square calculations, or the variances for the different elements in our one-way repeated measures ANOVA. And then once we have the mean squares calculated, we can then compute our F statistics. And I'm going to pull this back over to the left. And what I have at the bottom of this Excel sheet is our ANOVA table, where we'll just copy and paste and maybe perform a couple of last-minute calculations to complete our overall ANOVA table. So I'm going to scroll back to the top, and the first thing we're going to have to do is calculate some averages. And the first average I'm going to calculate is the average of the 10 participants measured at each of the time points. So I'm going to type that in here using the Excel command, and once again I start with the equal sign, and I'm going to type in the command average. I'm going to shift 9, and I'm going to highlight all the cells that I want to factor into that average calculation. I'm going to go up here to the formula bar, and I'm going to shift 0 to close a parentheses, and I hit enter, and we have an average of 8.5 collapsed across the 10 participants for the first time point. And I'm just going to highlight this cell. I'm going to grab the bottom right hand corner, or move my cursor over to the bottom right hand corner until the image changes to a plus sign. I'm going to grab that, hold the left mouse key down, I'm going to pull across, and now I have the average value calculated at each time point. And I just confirm here I have F2 through F11. Now for the one-way ANOVA, this differs quite a bit from a one-way between ANOVA, which does not involve repeated measures, is that we have to consider the variation within each of the participants. And so to do that, I need to first calculate the average score for each participant individually. And I'm going to put that value right here. I'm going to hit the equal sign and type in average. I'm going to shift 9, open parentheses, and I'm going to grab all of these values right here for the first participant. I'm going to shift 0, and I hit the enter sign. And now I have the average for the first participant, and I'm going to highlight this cell. I'm going to move my cursor over to the bottom right hand corner, and I'm just going to grab it and pull down, and that should carry forward all of the calculations, and I confirm by selecting the last cell, and I have B11 to F11, so I have B11 out through F11, and that's the average for each of the participants. I have one more average to calculate, and that's the grand average, or the grand mean, and I'm going to put that value right here. And so that's going to be the average of all of these values right here that we'll have to use in our equations. So I'm going to hit the equal sign. I'm going to type in average, the Excel command. I'm going to shift 9, and I could do this 3 different ways. I can average all of the averages along the row here. I can average the averages along this column, or I can just take the average of all the raw data. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the average of all the raw data. So I'm just going to highlight all of the raw data, making sure I don't overlap with the other calculations. I shift 0 to close the parentheses, and now I have my average overall of all of the participants. So when we move forward with the calculation of the sums of squares for the different elements here by using our ANOVA equations, we're basically going to start combining the different averages to build into these equations. So this will end the first part of our video here, where what we did was just calculate the averages at each time point, the average for each participant, and the overall average.